And speaking of corner, that's obviously the other group. We got one more position, both secondary, corner and safety, but we'll stay in corner first. I just mentioned DJ Waller's strong freshman year last year. Josh Wallace comes in. Some folks didn't have crazy high expectations for him. I remember I had made a comp. It was kind of like Jamon Green coming back was how I felt about it. And it was like, you've got your CB2, but maybe one of the young guys takes the role. Nobody took the role. Josh Wallace ended up having a phenomenal season. DJ Waller got some good experience. So did Hill. Waller ends up transferring out after the spring. So Jair Hill, who had a really strong spring and a lot of talk that he was already a strong leader at that CB2 position. And then Cam Calhoun was a transfer out as well. So we were wondering what Michigan was going to do here. And they go out and they add Amir Hall, who is, what do you call, is that FCS All-American then? Is that how you, yep, FCS All-American. And Ricky Johnson, who's an interesting guy, another dude, again, experience, somebody that comes in. Where do you guys, I'm torn on this because it's exactly what you want to add in terms of experienced corners that could be a part of the competition and also add depth, because behind Will Johnson and Jair Hill is like, oh man, where's the depth here? But in terms of rotation or even that CB2 spot, how do you see this shaking out with Hall, Johnson, and then, yeah, like I said, your sophomore Jair Hill, some experienced guys you already have on roster like Keyshawn Harris?
Sorry, I've been distracted because I want to jam my head through this damn monitor by reading these comments right now. I mean, I think besides this one, hi, Mom.
Oh,
I love you, Mom.
Let's go.
But yeah, I mean, like we mentioned with the wide receivers, you're basically going like for like, but with a little more experience. Well, in Amir Hall's case, a lot more experience. That's kind of the big question is, what is the rotation going to look like? And I think, that'll ultimately be decided come fall, but, Hall's coming in here willing to work day one. I mean, he doesn't really care what spot. He reminds me a lot of a Josh Wallace. Yep. A lot of a Josh Wallace.
Yeah.
And, say what you will about the competition and stuff, but, I think he's coming in and he's got some good numbers. So we'll kind of see how that factors in. But I think it's pretty clear that Johnson and Hill are your 1 and 2. And then Amir Hall is going to factor in as well. And then Ricky Johnson will also kind of, be involved in some level. But I think the good thing now is there's depth because, 2 weeks ago, we were taught, when was the last time we talked about the cornerback? We're having a conversation like, yeah, we feel pretty good about where these, corners are. However, if there's an injury, you're razor thin now. So now you're kind of looking at it like, okay, they could probably absorb an injury now. You wouldn't want to. I mean, I think that'll really, ruin a lot of things, but with Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson, and now you've got some guys in there that are experienced and have played games. So you're not just trotting out guys that haven't really, seen the field. So you can allow a couple other guys to develop in the process. But yeah, I mean, when you're comparing DJ Waller and Cam Calhoun, I mean, yeah, Waller showed some promise. Calhoun, didn't really play. And now you've got, Amir Hall, who's played a ton of football, and Ricky Johnson has played his fair share of football, and I think he's the biggest unknown out of this group. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing either. It's just, it's kind of really hard to predict a guy who hasn't really played much football, and his numbers are kind of, all over the place. But I think I do know one thing, and this goes for, the safeties too, that we'll talk about here in a minute. These guys do a lot of things well, but differently. I mean, you've got Amir Hall, who's a better coverage guy, Ricky Johnson, who's a better tackler, especially if you go through Pro Football Focus numbers that, I did a couple of weeks ago. Amir Hall graded out the best coverage wise. Ricky Johnson was the better tackler. And obviously we'll talk about the safeties too, because those two guys also have different things that they do well too. So you're not bringing in exactly the same player who does the same thing, who's going to have the same role. You've got guys that you can put in there in different situations who will excel over the other guy. So obviously, you know what you have with Will Johnson. You kind of know what you have with Jair Hill. You're hoping that that kind of trajectory stays, up. But yeah, adding Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson in the mix, now you're talking about a rounded out group where you're not necessarily worrying about injuries. I mean, yeah, you always got to think about them, but now, they can afford to absorb, a loss if, that were to happen. But, that obviously football is just a weird sport like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh man, these were the best additions. I think the Zavada, their kicker was their best portal addition out of all of them. And that's
a good point.
Crazy to say, but I think that was their best portal addition. But I mean, I think they're fine additions, and there's nothing wrong with fine additions. I said the same thing about Josh Wallace. It was fine. If he had a good season, that's the best case scenario. If Amir Hall, now we've got something to compare it to, right? If Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson have Josh Wallace-like seasons, best case scenario for Michigan's defense. And the same thing goes for wide receivers. If they have a Cornelius Johnson level type of season, best case scenario. So they're fine additions. They're the guys that have seen a lot of football, that'll likely play a lot of football this year. And if they play well, Michigan did well in the portal, and that's all you can really say. But you're not going to see me here screaming from the mountaintop saying these were the best damn additions that they've ever done. Don't get me wrong. I do think a guy that we're going to talk about here in a second is an excellent addition, but it's
troll so hard.
Yeah, and more ways than one. But I think these are fine additions, and it's okay that they're fine. They don't have to make headlines all the time by adding these big name guys. I think they did great in the portal, and ultimately with the way they've been scouting the portal of late, I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, that 2 weekends ago, I think it was when they added these 4 guys right in like 48 hours. That was arguably the biggest 48 hours of the off season. I mean, a month ago or whatever it was when we were on here talking, just like you said, Josh, it was Will Johnson and Jair Hill, and then question mark for that third corner spot. And what does Sharon Moore do? He goes out and he grabs Amir Hall and he grabs Ricky Johnson the third. And all of a sudden, your cornerback room goes from terribly thin to really deep. And I agree with Josh. Amir Hall is literally Josh Wallace 2.0. And Sharon Moore said it in the media availability, or I guess it wasn't an availability, but he was at the Sound Mind, Sound Body football camp at Wayne State this past week. And he said Amir Hall's personality is just like Josh Wallace's. And when Sharon Moore first reached out to Amir Hall, Hall said, "Coach, I just want to win you another championship." And sounds like he's a team first guy, and that's exactly what Michigan's looking for. I think they're in a great spot. I really do. I agree in the sense that Ricky Johnson is probably the biggest unknown there, but like Josh said, it's not a bad thing. You've got guys that can compete and make each other better and push for that second spot. Obviously, Will Johnson's going to anchor it down, and I'm just really excited about it. Amir Hall and Jair Hill, I think, are 2 guys that will really be able to push each other and fight for that second spot. But yeah, and Keyshawn Harris too is a guy that doesn't get enough love either. It really in the span of like 2 days went from incredibly thin to now. I think Michigan fans should feel really, really good about where they're at corner.
No, I agree. And the question mark of like, oh, well, but what if something happens to Will Johnson? It doesn't matter who you would have added if something happens to Will Johnson. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like we said the same thing. What if JJ gets hurt? Well, there's not another JJ on the roster, right? Like that gap is always, he's the best corner in college football.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So man, you hope he stays healthy. That's just what do you mean? You know, there was nothing.
I do want to address. I see some comments here. Yeah, we're not. Obviously we know Jayshon Barham is a
Yeah, we were
transfer.
talking about this window,
Right? We're talking about this
Yes,
window,
window.
and it is funny because he's been on the team since like the early January. Where he feels like he's been on the team for years. Yeah, I mean this is
such a good
Barham is like far and away the best guy that they picked up the whole portal cycle.
Or pre.
Yeah, you got starter at guard too.
Yeah, I mean they did really well the first time around, but we're talking specifically about this window.
I could have put linebacker in this conversation. I didn't, because you had 3 exits as well. And that was a group that was pretty thin a couple of years ago, where it was like, this is Colson and Barrett, and that's it.
Yep.
And then they outed Houseman, right? And now by adding Barham, and that's starter level, and Houseman now up to starter level, and Hood making progress, and Rolder coming into his junior year, and then Cole Sullivan, who we've been hyped on since he committed. I mean, the guy's an absolute beast. Somebody I thought was probably going to end up at edge, but it's looking more and more likely he's going to stay at linebacker, especially this first year. And then even Christian, is it Boivin or Bolvin? I feel like I always pronounce it wrong.
I think it's Boivin or something. It's weird. It's French.
He's a guy that's done. He's doing the Michigan thing, man. He's climbed up through special teams contributor, and he's probably going to see the field a little bit this year, at least add some depth. So look, I wish Jeremiah Beasley was still part of the equation, but that's a guy that it's like he literally was never part of the team and an early enrollee, right? Yeah. Leaving. And then obviously Samaj Bridgman trying to find that Sam role. It doesn't really seem like there's a fit in the defense anymore. He goes to Sparty. People had high expectations about Hayden, but man, Barham's just it, dude. Like you went out and got the best possible addition to replace Junior Colson. So yeah, I think big picture, the entire window, he's probably the best ad. But in this window specifically, yeah, Amir Hall, Josh, you brought up his numbers. This is a guy people always say, oh, he played where and the level of dude, look at the NFL and where these dudes play. Football is football. Right. He was targeted 100 times last year. Right. This dude's gotten reps. He had 5 interceptions, 12 pass breakups. 12. You know, like, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it's like Suggs too from Grand Valley. You know, a lot of people probably were scratching their heads when they saw Michigan.
Until he commits to LSU, and now we're mad we didn't get him. Right?
Yeah, right. And then a bunch of other schools follow suit after Michigan offers. And
so funny.
And obviously, Wisconsin really was first to offer him. But yeah, I mean, if you're the game of football, if you're talented, they're going to find you. It doesn't matter where you play, at what level of competition that you play at, they're going to find you. And again, that goes for the NFL too.
They probably just got missed in the high school cycle.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of these dudes, if they can't get to the camps, that's it these days, right? It's not a secret. We don't travel as much. And when I say we, I mean the larger recruiting above us, not us, the Michigan site, but rivals, or all the other site competitors. These guys don't go out and travel very much. The people that travel are the people on the smaller sites. They host these camps, and if you get to the camps, that gets you your recognition. Or when you start getting offers from big schools, that gets our attention. Look at the recruiting rankings, and all of a sudden, all the OSU commitments start going up in the rankings. A quarterback we'll get to in a moment that Michigan's on, all of a sudden, top 50 on Rivals now, right? The teams kind of got them first, right? So guys just get picked up. Sorry, I saw my name, call my attention. Anyway, so people asking, they kind of link together. I didn't include Jaden McBurrows and Zeke Berry in this part of the conversation. McBurrows is a guy that can probably play outside, but it feels like those two are kind of in the nickel spot. Maybe we include that here with safety because there's some flexibility there, right? But the biggest loss of the portal, in my opinion, no way around it, was Keon Sabb.
Yeah.
What he did last year, but more importantly, I think coming into this year, he was projecting to be really, really good. And I'm not going to pretend anybody that was added is at that level, right? But Michigan kind of did what Michigan always does. It's, you've lost Mike Sainer still, Rod Moore now with an injury, and then Keon Sabb transfer. There's probably not one guy that replaces that dude. Maybe there's 2. Maybe there's rotation. Maybe there's scheme things, right? Let's the committee approach, the money ball, right? You're not replacing Jason Giambi with one dude, right? So that's kind of what we've seen. Quentin Johnson coming back, I think, was an underrated big ad. He was solid last year. Sab, Johnson, Moore, and Page, all four of those guys played very similar snap levels. Some of that was injury related. Some of it seemed to be even game scheme related. You saw Keon Sab not really a factor in, was it Ohio State or Bama? I don't remember which game. And then obviously was instrumental in the national championship game. So, but anyway, that was another spot where it was like coming into the year, I'm like, man, Rod Moore's back, Johnson's back, Page is back. This is so deep. Uh-oh. Right. So 2 big additions here. One, the Michigan State transfer. Good Lord, if you are on Twitter and saw the back and forth between Mangum's family and Michigan State, not just fans, former players, well-respected writers in the community, I just could not believe it.
Yeah, embarrassing. Just embarrassing behavior.
Unbelievable. And then I keep wanting to call him Wes Welker, and I will.
Yeah.
Wesley Walker from Tennessee added in as well. Josh, you've already kind of touched on this, though. Very different players.
Yep.
I haven't put the depth chart together yet because I really have no idea how I think they're going to use these guys coming into the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I mean, I love Jang and Mang. I love Jang Mangum's addition because he has an extra year of eligibility, which would be huge for this group because you add another. You're going to lose. I mean, probably going to lose Rod Moore. I don't know what that situation looks like.
Yeah.
Excuse me, because obviously, I mean, he's eligible for a redshirt year, but that's a down the line conversation. But yeah, getting a guy like Jaden Mangum back, you lose Page after this year, you lose Quentin Johnson after this year, adding Mangum back into the group. I mean, that's awesome. And the kid, just needs a good defense to play on. He just needs a good defensive system that puts him in good spots, and you'll start to see what he can do. Jaden Mangum last year, just despite how awful Michigan State's defense was last year, was pretty damn good in run coverage. In run coverage snaps, he was the highest graded addition Michigan made out of the 4 defensive backs. Wesley Walker, I think, is a fine addition. I think he's going to play. He's going to be good. Probably, I would say, the more underrated addition out of the 4 guys, probably beyond Ricky Johnson. I think Walker has the most promise behind Mangum and Hall. I think he will be that next guy that'll have a really good year. But again, and we're just talking strictly additions here. We're not leaving out Zeke Berry and Hillman and stuff. Those guys will play.
Very, very hyped on Brandon Hillman.
Yeah. Zeke Berry will play. But again, this isn't a let's leave out guys. I mean, yeah, obviously Zeke and Hillman are going to play. But, we're just talking specifically just the additions here. And I think Jaden Mangum is an excellent addition as safety. Zeke, is he a safety? Is he a nickel? He can kind of play both. So I don't know really what will classify him yet. Hillman, obviously a pure safety, so he'll be in the mix. Again, you're essentially, we'll include a Rod Moore as a subtraction from the group, though Sharon Moore said he's ahead of schedule, which if you're looking at schedule-wise, you're talking probably a November return for Rod Moore. So if he comes back for the game, I mean, that would be gigantic. But again, we'll kind of see how he, heals up and what his rehab is like. I guess if you ever needed an injury to one of your best guys, I guess early spring is the time to do it. I mean, obviously you don't want to see anyone get injured, but time-wise, I guess that's probably the best case scenario, that he'll be back at some point. So anyway, that's down the line. But yeah, I just think you've got guys, as I said, you've got guys that do a lot of things really well. Mangum is really good in run coverage. Walker's really good in pass coverage. no touchdowns given up last year, which is really good numbers. So, again, you've got depth there. You've got guys you can afford to, lose a guy or two if it came down to that. You got guys that have experience, other guys that are kind of ascending guys who've done really well in spring with Zeke and Hillman. A lot to like with the defensive backs. I feel a lot better about this group now coming out of spring. And I wasn't exactly, freaking out or worried, but you've got depth. They did exactly what they wanted to do. They addressed the depth, they added experience, and they, essentially, I would call, when you're comparing the losses to additions, I would call it a wash. I don't think Michigan, the losses really outweigh the additions, and the additions don't really outweigh the losses. I think Michigan is right where they need to be heading into August and obviously the summer. And we'll see how things go. But again, there's a lot to like. I mean, I think Michigan did a really good job identifying guys and getting in quick and really getting these guys in. Like Mangum had his fair share of suitors, and Michigan got in and sealed the deal pretty quickly. Like Wesley Walker too. So yeah, a lot to like for sure.
Of the 4 defensive back additions, I think I'm highest personally on Jaden Mangum. I think he's an absolute stud, and I agree with what you said, Josh. He needs a good defense to play on. He was a star on just a terrible Michigan State defense last year, and I think if he has better pieces around him than what he had last year in East Lansing, I think he's going to really flourish and thrive at Michigan. And so I'm really high on him. I do think he's going to be right there, probably the leader is what I'd have him at to start there next to Makari Page. Wesley Walker is a guy going into his 6th year of college football at his 5th school, which is insane.
Modern college football.
Yeah.
I'd have to look back. It's a crazy journey, and I'd have to look to see exactly how it went. But Georgia Tech, I think Ole Miss was in there, Tennessee and Louisville, I believe, were the 4 schools before Michigan. But just a crazy journey for him. I do like that pickup. He's an experienced guy, played a lot of football. So I do think Michigan's in a good spot. Obviously, Zeke Berry, Brandon Hillman. This kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about at corner. Michigan was pretty thin a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden you grab Jaden Mangum, grab Wesley Walker. Not Wes Walker, the wide receiver for the Patriots. It's tricky. It's you grow up watching Wes Welker and all of a sudden there's a Wesley Walker. But yeah, I like where Michigan's at here. I'm curious though. Obviously, this is way down the line and we're looking at November, but I wonder what would happen if Michigan is say like 10-0 heading into the Northwestern game on November 23rd. And Rod Moore is ready to come back, but Michigan's undefeated. The defense is good without him. I wonder if you force him back, for that Northwestern game or the week leading up to the Ohio State game, or if you just, stick with what you have and roll with it. I'm curious to see if Rod Moore does, continue ahead of schedule, as Sharon Moore was saying, if they try and force him back, if the team is playing well, or if they keep him out, if things are going well.
I don't think it's a team decision at all.
Yeah.
I think it's whatever Rod Moore wants to do. Rod Moore has given everything he needs to give to this program.
Yeah, sure.
So whatever is best for his future or whatever. But if Rod Moore tells you he's good enough to play, you're playing Rod Moore.
Yeah, and
that's just my opinion.
Within that redshirt window too, like I think it's 4 games. Is it 4 games now?
Yeah, they can.
They're allowed to play in at any point.
Well, the playoff doesn't count.
Yeah, so you're talking in your scenario 10-0. You're assuming Michigan wins those last 2 games. Yeah. There's a 3rd game, and the playoffs don't count. So if Rod Moore is set on coming back next year, you're preserving a red shirt regardless. I mean, so why not? I think he's too good. If he wants to come back and play, I think he's too good to leave off the field. I mean, that's just another.
And that doesn't mean he's starting and playing more snaps. You don't know what that looks like. To your point,
right. Yeah.
I don't know. Man, That's just something that if that happens, oh my God. I thought he was going to the NFL anyway.
Yeah.
So I more just feel bad for the dude. He deserves, this is a
Yeah.
guy that came in. I mean, we've told this story a bunch of times. Kid from Ohio, didn't get the OSU offer, underrated 3-star, starts contributing as a freshman, becomes one of the leaders on the defense, makes a legendary play like every single TV broadcast before Michigan, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Right? When they show Charles Woodson fighting with David Boston, they are going to show Rod Moore's interception.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the level of what that play was. That was his elbow, not a football, you idiots. I still see people posting that, and it's just good Lord. But yeah,
That's all they have the grasp onto these days.
it's unbelievable. Anyway, Mangum, I don't know how many times this, and this kind of ties in with Amir Hall as well, and Josh Wallace in the previous year. When you're a really, really good football player on a bad team, that hurts you.
Yeah.
And when you're a really good football player on a really good team, it's a team sport, man. If your other 10 dudes are really, really good, you're going to be better.
Yeah.
Right? So Mangum, who was Michigan State's most important player for Rossi's defense and blah, 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 until he left and he was a bum and they didn't want him anymore.
Yeah.
Look, honorable All-American, honorable All Big Ten last year. Did he make some mistakes? Yeah. But, Josh, we keep talking about, I agree. I think he's known, or at least what I see, is a guy that has the speed and intensity to get up quick and make an impact in the run game. Very Sainer-esque in that aspect. He also had 4 or 5 picks last year?
Yeah, something like that.
And
yeah.
a couple of them were right place, right time.
Right.
Have to be the dude standing there or whatever. But
Yeah.
He was every player on Michigan's secondary who had enough snaps graded above him. But they graded above everybody in Michigan State's secondary. They've been atrocious, some of the worst in college football for 2 years.
Yeah.
He's the bright spot. He's the guy that wanted to come here, but we took Keon Sabb and Zeke Berry. Now Sabb's out. He comes in. He's playing with Berry. I'm really excited about that ad. And if he's not, he doesn't have to be the best player in the secondary like he had to at East Lansing. Right. So it's a good fit. And then Walker, I'd have to look who he actually, I think he committed to schools and didn't stay, because the only thing he's got listed is Tennessee and Georgia Tech as schools he's actually played for. But I know because Ricky had committed somewhere else before, right? Because
Washington State.
Yeah, I can't keep up with it. But
yeah.
As far as this question, any chance there's more portal additions? The only one I think the fishing line was out on defensive tackle for a while there.
Well, yep.
I know there's still a couple of names floating there. I thought I almost put offensive line in here as well, kind of in the same vein as nothing really happened. There was some talk that maybe a tackle or another interior offensive lineman. I take that as a good sign.
Yeah.
You're happy about Miles, and we've got, I'm hitting my wall now, boys. Gentry versus Percy at right tackle. Yeah. So again, some of it's probably a wash, but I like the depth, and I like the pieces, and I like the potential they've added. It's a really, really good defense, no matter what. If they're not the best defense in the country, they're going to be second or third, right? We can get in the defensive front and everything as well there, but